Our reading this morning comes from the poet Trev Chemensky, who writes social media poetry. He writes under the handle @ofahand. I'm not sure if this was the title that he intended it to have, but it was underneath a post. It said, her name was Irene. And he said this: I went to McDonald's at 6 in the morning and had a large coffee with the truckers and the sunrisers and the old-timers who read the newspaper together and who always say goodbye even if they don't know each other, even to me. And two construction workers start to talk to each other even though they are at different tables, and they're sitting across from each other in the dining area and they've never met before, and everybody can hear them. One is older and one is younger, and they talk about fishing spots and company names and what their dads used to do. Eventually, that talk turns into talk about their favorite towns and their daughters and their wives, and that one of the man's wives died when he was 34. And they talk about money and medical bills, and the other man doesn't say, I'm sorry. He just asks for her name. And the old man says it clearly because it never gathered any dust. And the two men don't know each other's names, but they know their wives' names. And one says, thank you for your service. And the other one says, my friends were in Vietnam, but I mostly just stood there. And sometimes things are longer than they should be, and sometimes they are shorter than a good dream. And they didn't say goodbye or shake hands, they just said, nice talking to you. And all McDonald's coffees are the same price, so you might as well get a large. Here ends our reading. The poet Sean Thomas Doherty once wrote a poem, a really brief poem addressing a writer friend who had stopped writing. He entitled it, Why Bother? It is short and pointed. Why bother, he asks, because right now there is someone out there with a wound in the exact shape of your words. Because our theme this month is interdependence, and because that particular shared value, what we currently call the seventh principle, is the one that most influences my personal theological worldview as a Unitarian Universalist, I've been thinking an awful lot about interdependence. And what's become apparent to me as I've been diving more deeply into it and to the new Article 2 proposal is that I have a tendency to think about the interdependent web of all existence as a thing of beauty that provokes in me an emotional and spiritual response that looks like awe or reverence or wow. The vast tendrils of connection suggesting by this way of viewing the world stun me. To think of ourselves in relationship to all that is, all that was, and all that will yet emerge, pondering the enormity, attempting to envision the infinite. When I meditate on it, I discover an inability to put my emotional or spiritual wonder into words. It's too big. My brain is not built to comprehend things of that size. And when I want to understand things that defy my imagination, I regularly turn to metaphor. Indeed, the web of all existence is itself a metaphor. But I've been coming to see that when I bask in the metaphor and I return repeatedly to that response, I neglect to get myself to the so what that needs to emerge on the other side. My tendency is to sit in blissful wonder, which is not incompatible with a verb attached to it in the seventh principle. I respect the heck out of that interdependent web. It is awesome. But it's not just an intellectual exercise. It's not just a metaphor. And it's not just a way of experiencing awe and wonder or feeling connected through evolutionary time and space and awareness, soul-feeding though that may be. What are we supposed to do as a consequence of this respect? The new Article 2 proposal uses the term shared values to refer to these guiding tenets of our faith. And it offers this about interdependence. We honor the interdependent web of all existence. With reverence for the great web of life and with humility, we acknowledge our place in it. We covenant to protect Earth and all beings from exploitation. We will create and nurture sustainable relationships of care and respect, mutuality and justice. We will work to repair harm and damaged relationships. The verbs used here don't let me sit in my navel-gazing or my stargazing wonder. They demand that I protect the beings and entities held within that web. They invite me to create and nurture and sustain and care and work to repair harm. When I feed my soul by surrounding myself with reminders of the divinity and the sacred holiness of life, I can too easily forget that simple human suffering ties us all together in that web. We are supported in our suffering as a consequence of this worldview. Whatever pain or suffering any individual may be experiencing is not some solitary hidden aspect of their experience in these cosmos. Their pain is our pain. Your pain is our pain. This web allows an acknowledgement of collective human pain. And if we pluck at the strands in an effort to share in beauty and wonder, we cannot forget to bring our individual pain back to the same sources, to seek comfort from those to whom we are connected rather than grow our silent shame at our imperfections, when friends by shame are undefiled. The Buddhist writer Tracy Cochrane shares that our location as part of the larger stream of life reminds us that life isn't asking us to be superheroes, swooping in to perform good deeds. It is asking us to join in, to be available, to bear witness to what is happening and respond as kindly and wisely as we can in any given moment. Our individual pains, she writes, are part of the pain, our collective human pain, the pain of loss or rejection. I might add the pain of fear or hopelessness, the pain of fearing ourselves to be inadequate to this time and its challenges, the pain of dying trees and dying people, of the human propensity to cause suffering for others through war or indifference or neglect or greed or a failure to acknowledge one another's essence as humans being human. A friend and I were planning to go to an event together, and I was anxious about what I was planning to do at this event. And she was anxious about showing up in a new place and not knowing what to expect. And so I texted her, "I'll hold your anxiety if you hold mine." And she responded, "That's the nicest thing anyone has ever offered me." It doesn't have to be hard, but it does have to be active, right? It can start by witnessing and amplifying the connection between two strangers at a McDonald's. And then, inspired by what we see, we can start asking what else is being asked of us. What is next? I don't mean to suggest that this is easy. I certainly don't find it to be easy. I can too easily get stuck in a paralysis of shame or sorrow at my own failures to live up to my animating values. The desire to keep these failures hidden from others is strong. Who wants to point out all the ways they are living contradictions in their lives? But who, my friends, is not living contradictions in their lives? I was recalling recently an imaginative tool about meditation practice that was shared with me by a friend several years ago. He noted that it's way too easy to beat ourselves up when we are trying to meditate and we can't still our minds if they spin off in chaotic directions when all we want to do is empty them. I told him that sometimes I found my inner monologue judging me twice. First, for letting my mind wander, and then again when I realized just how long I'd let it wander before I noticed that it had gone for a walk. At any rate, he said that when he thinks about meditation or helping people to meditate, He asks people to imagine how they would respond if there was a crawling baby on a blanket that they needed to keep spread out on the grass, and they needed to keep the baby on the blanket. And when the baby started crawling away, when it got to the edge or even left the blanket entirely, would you yell at it to get back where you belong? Of course not. You'd go get the baby and gently pick it up and return it to the center of the blanket. You might even give it a cuddle or a smooch as you set it back down again. It might start scooting away as soon as you set it back down again, delighted by its ability to move and all the things it has to explore in the world, rather like our minds. So you'd go to it again, filled with love and kindness and compassion for its impulsiveness, and you would bring it back to that blanket. No judgment, no anger, no frustration. Here you go. Towards how many things in our lives might that practice apply? When we let ourselves down by failing to meet some self-imposed standard or failing to live consistent with our values, when we let others down in the same way, when others let us down, if we experience a contradiction between what they say they believe and how they act toward us, the tugging of that web that ties us all together suggests that we will all be made better if we choose to respond to those letdowns with compassion and tender care rather than reactive anger or frustration. Why hide our humanness? Just pick ourselves and our values and concerns back up and put them in the center of the blanket. Of course it will happen again. Life is hard. We face complicated interpersonal and intrapersonal interactions every day. Let's get back on that blanket. Why do we even use metaphors? To help us circle around the truths about life that we struggle to understand or explain. So the challenge is to use the metaphor to assist us in living more meaningfully and compassionately and truthfully. When I did some sleuthing, trying to figure out more information about the writer of that deceptively simple reading I shared earlier about drinking coffee at McDonald's, I found that the poet used this tagline in all his work. Voices mustn't be measured by their pretty sound. They should be measured by how they tell the truth. What if we extended that? Metaphors shouldn't be measured by their pretty images. They should be measured by how they tell their truth, how they inspire us to live our truth. The writer Toni Cade Bambara says that there are so few truth-speaking traditions in this society. We have rarely been encouraged and equipped to appreciate the fact that the truth actually works. The truth works, that it releases the spirit, and that it is a joyous thing. Voices mustn't be measured by their pretty sound. They should be measured by how they tell the truth. Metaphors should help us live our lives, not just sit there as pretty images. Can we be grateful that we have a diversity of voices and experiences, voices that enable us to move beyond the melody line into touching harmonies? Two voices singing different notes open up for us a whole range of emotional and experiential truth that could not be achieved if all we ever had access to were the same voices singing the same notes. There is such beauty in contrast and diversity, which in the end can remind us that we are all in this together. I've got this note, you take that one. Together, we can make our lives more human, more holy, and more whole. Together, our unique pitches invite us into beauty and solutions and comfort and inspiration and possibility and power and action and forgiveness and belonging and awareness together. Being human is not a solo act. In 2019, the Buddhist teacher and climate activist Joanna Macy wrote about the importance of a certain kind of truth-telling in these chaotic times. Macy suggested that perhaps the truest form of touching the reality of this moment is this: to experience our capacity to praise and love our world as it is, even when it's on fire. She described an experience of being on retreat and engaging in a walking meditation. I was just concentrating, placing the foot, lifting the heel, but this mindfulness was broken by a stupid memory. It stuck like a burr. I didn't need it. It was about some minor embarrassment to me years back. And she thought, I thought to myself, I should know better how to handle this. Just noting. And then I despaired, asking, what do I do? And right at my left side rose a thunderous voice that said, just fall in love with it. Fall in love with what is, whether inside us or out there. Offer it love, active love, love that demands our engagement and care and our connection with others, love that offers a story over a large McDonald's coffee, that invites the invocation of a beloved name, that reminds us to stay deeply, openly human, and thus flawed and imperfect, and yet worthy of love anyway. Why bother? Because right now there is someone out there with a wound the exact shape of your words. Because if we all lose, we will all lose if we don't try to find ourselves with one another. Because sometimes we all tell lies even to ourselves, and we need one another to remind us that this world can handle our truths. Because I can hold your anxiety if you can hold mine. Because our truths are inextricably woven together. Because we can't make harmony if we get stuck on the same line. Because we have the power to act, and with that power and within our metaphors, we also have our obligations and our responsibilities to one another. Because we are prone to wandering away from our truths. And because judgment won't help us lead back to them. Because we are beautifully, anxiously alive. And the world and the web need us to remember that always. May it be so. Amen.